Hi, I'm Silas, and on the day I graduated high school, my father punched me in the face. Then he threw a crumpled $100 bill at me like I was trash on his doorstep and told me, "Get out. I'm done paying for another man's mistake." What he didn't know was that I already knew the truth. That the man he hated most, the one he swore was dead to me, had been trying to reach me for years. So I picked up the bill, wiped the blood off my lip, and smiled. Because what Garrick thought would destroy me only proved I never belonged to him. And right outside, my real father was waiting. But what would you do if the man who raised you never once called you by your real name, and the man who loved you was kept from your life on purpose? The sun was beating down on the parking lot when we pulled into the school grounds, but inside the truck it felt cold enough to see my breath. My name is Silas Mercer, the youngest son in a house where being the youngest didn't make me the baby, just the one easiest to blame. Riding next to Garrick was like sitting beside a closed gate. He never said much, but his silence always carried a judgment I could feel in my bones. We didn't speak the whole drive. He kept his eyes straight ahead, tapping the steering wheel like he was counting the minutes until he could be rid of me. Outside, families were waving signs, snapping photos, calling out names. Inside, I pressed my thumb to the corner of my lip. I've done that since I was a kid. Ever since I learned to brace myself before he got angry. I didn't expect anything big out of today. I just wanted to walk across the stage, breathe a little, maybe feel like I belonged to something, even if only for a moment. When the ceremony ended, everyone spilled out into the parking lot, the air buzzing with celebration. Couples hugged, parents cried, people handed out cards filled with cash or handwritten notes. I stood by the truck where Garrick told me to wait. He walked toward me slowly, hands in his pockets, expression flat as a wall. He stopped right in front of me. I opened my mouth to thank him for coming, but he leaned in and whispered, "You should thank me for raising you at all." I didn't even have time to process the words before his fist connected with my face. It wasn't a slap or a shove. It was a punch that knocked the air out of my chest and sent me down to one knee. I tasted iron instantly. The noise around us faded. Someone gasped. Someone else muttered, "What in the world?" Then he pulled a wrinkled $100 bill from his pocket and tossed it so it landed beside my shoe. "Get out! I'm done paying for another man's mistake," I heard a woman somewhere say. Lord, did he just say that to his own kid? But everything sounded far away. I stared at the bill for a second, not because I needed it, but because leaving it there felt like agreeing with him. So I picked it up, not fast, not desperate, just steady. My lip was bleeding down my chin. I wiped it with the back of my hand. People were watching, but I didn't feel small. Not this time. Something inside me shifted, like a hinge finally turning the right direction. Garrick expected me to yell. He expected tears. He expected me to break the way I always had. Instead, I stood up and looked him in the eye. I didn't shout. I didn't raise a hand. I just gave him a calm smile, the kind that made his shoulders stiffen. I reached into my jacket and took out the envelope I'd carried for years, the one my mother, Rowena, left behind before everything went sideways. I handed it to him, his name written in her handwriting across the front. "I know," I told him, "and my real father is waiting outside." A few people whispered, "Real father?" Someone else said, "Wait, what's happening?" Garrick didn't move at first. He just stared at the envelope like it might burn him. Then he glanced toward the lot, toward the row of cars reflecting the late afternoon sun. As he turned his head, the color drained from his face. Garrick's body locked up like he'd seen a ghost. His fists twitched, not clenched like a man ready to fight, but like he wasn't sure whether to run or deny what was standing just 20 feet away. I turned to see what had shaken him. There he was, leaning against a black sedan, arms folded, not a flicker of doubt in his face. Adrian Kessler. He didn't flinch under the weight of Garrick's stare. He stood with that quiet kind of strength that makes you lean in, not out. Calm posture, chin up, eyes steady. I'd seen photos of him when I was a kid, hidden in a box my mom kept under her bed, but the man in front of me wasn't a picture. He was real, present, watching everything. I remember the only words my mom whispered before she died. One day, you'll understand. That day was now. The crowd around us was no longer clapping or cheering. It was murmuring. The silence that had fallen after Garrick hit me had shifted into something else. Curiosity laced with unease. I caught bits of it. Did he just say, real father? That man, he doesn't look like the other guy at all. A nearby teacher, Mr. Holman, stepped in carefully. Silas, do you need a nurse? Should we call? He's fine, Garrick snapped before I could answer. People heard that tone, the one he usually saved for behind closed doors. A few stepped back. I saw a mom clutch her daughter's hand tighter. The mask was slipping. For the first time, they were seeing Garrick, not the business owner who donated to school fundraisers, not the guy shaking hands at church, but the one who made your spine stiffen when he walked in the room. And he knew it. That's what scared him more than anything. Not Adrian, not me. It was the unraveling of control, publicly. I could feel a shift inside me too, like a knot coming loose after being tied too tight for too long. And then something pulled me back. A memory. I was 10. We were doing a family photo shoot for some holiday card. Everyone was there. Verdana in her pressed dress, Pierce and Emmeline standing tall beside Garrick like soldiers in formation. I had on this itchy sweater I hated, and I kept pulling at the collar. I stood next to them, smiling like I belonged. Then Verdana looked at the photographer and said, "Can we just move him out of frame for a second? There's not enough room." She didn't even look at me. Garrick barely blinked. The photographer hesitated, but then motioned toward the side of the yard. "Maybe just for a few shots, kiddo." I remember walking over and standing behind a tree, watching the flash go off, watching the rest of them smile. I kept thinking, but I'm part of this family, aren't I? No one answered. It wasn't just that I got left out of a picture, it was how easy it was for them. How natural. Now back in the present, the same feeling was trying to pull me under, but it couldn't. Not anymore. I pressed the last trace of blood off my lip with the sleeve of my gown. My hands weren't shaking. My legs weren't weak. Adrian took a small step forward, but I lifted a hand. Not yet. This moment wasn't his to take. It was mine to finish. I turned to Garrick and looked him dead in the eye. "You always told me I was nothing. Let's see if that still works today." His face twitched. Anger, panic, confusion, all trying to surface at once. But instead of yelling, instead of making a scene, he did something that caught me completely off guard. He stepped back. Half a step, but enough. Enough to feel it. The shift in weight, in power, in everything. I didn't win. Not yet. But the rules of the game were no longer his alone. That's when he moved. Not toward Adrian. Not toward the car. Garrick turned, teeth clenched, and started walking straight toward me again. But this time, He wasn't aiming for my face. His hand shot toward my chest, toward the envelope. The one with my mother's handwriting, sealed since the year she died. The only thing left untouched between us. Garrick didn't say a word. His eyes were wide, frantic. Not angry the way they usually were when I spoke out, but scared, like that envelope might burn him if it opened. I yanked it back instinctively and stepped away. "You've avoided this for 18 years, I said, my voice sharp, but even. "Not anymore." He froze mid-step, eyes darting around us, calculating. People were still watching. A few parents were whispering. One had her phone out, not low or subtle, but right in the open, recording. Garrick saw it too. He knew he couldn't make another scene. He took half a step back, but his fingers twitched like he still wanted to grab it. And that's when I saw it, clear as day. He wasn't afraid of me. He was afraid of what I had, of what it meant, of what it would confirm. The last piece. I didn't mean to remember what I did in that moment, but it came rushing back like a flood. Sharp, fast, cold. I was 15, in the kitchen. Garrick had been out of town. I was digging through drawers, looking for batteries for the remote. Instead, I found a manila envelope stuffed behind a pile of tax papers. Nothing fancy, just an old billing document. The name on top said Rowena Clare, my mother. I froze. Below it, under responsible party, was Garrick's name, but it had a thick black line scratched across it. Underneath, in clean ink, a different name, Adrian Kessler. At the time, I didn't know who that was, didn't ask. I shoved it back and said nothing. Just one more weird thing in a house full of tension and secrets. But now I knew. That envelope I'd handed Garrick wasn't just some letter. It was the answer he'd spent years burying, and I just handed it to him in front of half the graduating class. More people were gathering now. Teachers, friends, parents, curious faces, raised phones. I saw Emmeline off to the side with Verdana, both frozen in place, trying to make sense of what they were seeing. Garrick hissed, voice low but sharp. "Give me that. Right now." I didn't move. "You don't get to demand anything from me anymore." He glanced at the crowd, at the phone cameras, his jaw clenched. His usual tactics, shame, silence, intimidation, weren't working. And then, just like that, he snapped into performance mode. "He stole it," he barked suddenly, turning toward the people near us. "That envelope? It's from my office. He broke into my files last week. He's trying to blackmail me with it." There it was, the rewrite, the cover-up, the real Garrick Mercer. A few people gasped. Some looked uncertain. Phones lowered just a little. He was good at this, at bending the story before anyone could pin him down. He'd done it for years. I felt the old bitterness creep in, like when I got my first academic award, and Pierce interrupted the dinner to announce his internship at his godfather's law firm, or when I asked Garrick to come see my art project in middle school, and he said, "Don't waste my time with glue and paper, Silas." But my sister's school play? He brought flowers. I'd always thought I wasn't trying hard enough, that maybe if I could just win a little louder, maybe I'd be seen. But now I saw it for what it was. He'd always made sure I was small enough to erase. And this time, he was doing it publicly. I kept my eyes on him. "You've lied to protect your image my whole life. I'm not helping you do it anymore." He flinched, not visibly, not enough for the crowd to catch it. But I saw it. A twitch behind the eyes. I don't know what made the memory surface right then. Maybe the desperation in his voice. But I suddenly remembered being 8. Verdana had broken a porcelain vase passed down from Garrick's grandmother. She was playing dress-up, tripped over her robe, knocked it clean off the table. But when Garrick came home, the pieces were already in the trash. He lined us up, asked who did it. I knew Verdana was scared. She was already crying. Garrick hated tears, so I stepped forward and said it was me. He looked at me with such cold disdain and muttered, "You can't even respect what doesn't belong to you." That line stuck. What doesn't belong to you. I carried that guilt for years, thinking I was clumsy, thoughtless, careless. But now, with that crowd watching, that envelope shaking in his hand, I knew the truth. He never wanted me to exist. It hit hard, like wind getting knocked from your chest, but silently. No sound, just collapse from the inside. I looked around the parking lot at the people who had just watched my graduation like it was any other kid's day. Their faces weren't just curious anymore. Some looked embarrassed for Garrick, some just confused, but no one was looking at me like I was the liar now. And then, through the noise and the silence and the swirl of everything, Adrian stepped forward. His voice cut through the tension like a blade. Everything around us seemed to pause. Conversations died mid-sentence. Phones stopped moving. Even the warm breeze that had been drifting across the parking lot felt like it stilled in place. Adrian didn't raise a hand. He didn't posture or puff up his chest. He simply stepped forward into the sunlight, stopping just far enough between us that Garrick had to look through him if he wanted to keep glaring at me. "Garrick," he said, calm but firm, "stop lying." The words were so simple, yet they shifted the whole moment. Garrick froze. A few people in the crowd whispered. I felt something inside me tilt, like gravity had changed direction. For 18 years, I tried to imagine what the man in front of me might be like. I never pictured someone so quiet, so steady. It made the panic in my chest settle, even if just a little. Adrian's breath was slow, controlled, no anger in his tone. He didn't need to threaten anyone. He just stood there with that unshakable certainty, as if he had waited nearly 2 decades to speak a truth that finally had space to be heard. "You have no right to be here," Garrick spat back, trying to reclaim the moment. But Adrian didn't budge. "I had every right the day you promised Rowena you would raise her son as your own." A wave of gasps rolled through the people watching. Someone whispered my mother's name, stunned to hear it spoken so openly. My chest tightened. Hearing her name from his mouth, spoken like it still meant something, felt like a hand pressing against a bruise I'd kept hidden. Garrick's jaw clamped down. His shoulders stiffened. He hated being called out, especially in public, especially by someone he couldn't control. I didn't even realize my mind was drifting until I smelled antiseptic again. The memory wasn't sudden. It came slowly, like someone opening a door they'd closed too gently. I was in a hospital room, white walls, humming machines, my mother's hand resting in mine. Her skin was cool, her voice thin. She whispered, "You're stronger than you know, and you're not alone, even when it feels like you are." At the time, I thought she meant I'd have to keep going without her. A simple message from a mother trying to ease her son's fear. But now, standing there with Adrian in front of me, I realized she meant something else. Something I wasn't ready for as a kid. Someone else was out there. Someone she trusted. She had pressed the sealed envelope into my hand the night before she passed. "Keep this until you're ready," she told me. I didn't understand why her voice shook when she said it. Today, that sentence finally made sense. The memory faded as I blinked back into the heat of the parking lot. And then Adrian spoke again, this time louder, leaving no space for Garrick to twist the truth. You hated Rowena for something she never did, he said, and you punished her son for it. The words hit me harder than Garrick's punch. I stared at him, then at Garrick, feeling the puzzle pieces lock into place. Garrick's hatred hadn't just been about biology, it was about pride, about a hurt he convinced himself existed, a betrayal he invented to justify the resentment he carried like armor. Garrick stepped backward, sweat beginning to form at his hairline. His voice rose, strained, defensive. She lied to me. She made me raise a boy that wasn't mine. Adrian didn't flinch. No. She begged you to tell Silas the truth. You refused. You needed him to feel small. My breath caught. It was like hearing the story of my life from the outside for the first time. A version where I wasn't the problem, where I wasn't the burden, where my existence wasn't something someone had to endure. All these years, I thought I was invisible because I hadn't earned a place. Now I understood I was pushed into the shadows because my presence threatened someone else's story. Something shifted inside me, not like a spark or an explosion, more like a slow, steady flame catching after years of trying to light a soaked match. A quiet, growing certainty. For the first time, the truth wasn't something to fear. It was something I could hold. Something that belonged to me, not to Garrick's version of events. I looked at him and no longer saw the man whose approval I chased. I saw someone desperately clinging to the last thread of control. His face twisted, something darker rising behind his eyes. It wasn't anger this time. It was desperation. He took one sharp step forward, past me, past the crowd, and then he lunged toward Adrian. My body moved before I could think. One foot forward, then another. I stepped between them, placing myself directly in Garrick's path. He skidded to a halt, less from any fear of me, more from surprise. His eyes flared with confusion, mouth twisting as though unsure what to say now that his target had shifted. Adrian froze behind me, not out of fear either, but in a quiet show of respect, like he understood this was something I needed to do on my own. You've done enough damage today, I said, my voice low but firm. The crowd murmured behind us, dozens of eyes locked on the scene, some still recording. Phones flicked up and down like they weren't sure whether this was a fight or a funeral. My heart beat hard in my chest, not out of panic, but from the weight of 18 years crashing into this one fragile moment. Garrick's chest heaved, his fists balled, but he didn't move. Not forward, not back. Just stuck. And then I heard it. Soft, careful. Silas, Adrian's voice. He didn't raise it. Didn't speak like a man trying to grab attention. It was the way someone says a name they've rehearsed in their heart for years, waiting for the right moment to let it mean something out loud. You don't have to protect me, he said. I turned my head slightly, but couldn't bring myself to look all the way at him. The sound of my name, said like that. It stunned me in a way I wasn't prepared for. Garrick used my name like a gavel, a sentence. Adrian said it like a welcome. I felt something tighten in my throat, a lump forming where words used to live. I couldn't speak. I didn't trust myself to, so I stepped away, not out of anger, not even shame, just overwhelmed. My hands trembled. My legs were starting to, too. I didn't want them all to see me like this, raw, shaken, and too close to crying in the middle of a school parking lot. So I walked. I didn't run. I just turned away from the crowd, the phones, the questions that would come later. I needed space, air. I needed something that didn't ask anything from me. I kept walking. 2 miles, give or take, from the school to the house. My feet dragged. My gown, creased and wrinkled from the day, caught on my heels. The late afternoon sun pulled long shadows across the road, washing the neighborhood in gold and dust. By the time I reached the porch, I could barely lift my head. Verdana's car wasn't there. Neither was Pierce's or Emmeline's, just Garrick's truck, parked crooked like he'd left in a rage. The front door creaked open. Inside, it was still. Too still. The kind of silence that presses down on your chest. His boots were by the door. His scent still hung faintly in the hallway, some mix of pine, sweat, and the cologne he always used too much of. I sat on the bottom step and let the quiet wrap around me. I thought it would help. It didn't. That's when it hit. Everything. The truth. The fight. The look on Garrick's face. The way Adrian had said my name. It all crashed down at once, like someone had been holding it back behind a dam and finally let go of the gate. I dropped my head into my hands and sat there, breathing shallow, too tired to cry, but too raw to stop feeling. And for a moment, just one, I wondered if maybe Garrick had been right. Maybe I was a mistake. Maybe all this, today, that envelope, that truth, should have stayed buried. Then my phone buzzed. I almost didn't look. Unknown number. I hesitated, thumb hovering over decline. But something in me whispered, "Pick it up." I did. "Silas?" Adrian. His voice on the line was steadier than I expected, warmer than I deserved. "I'm outside," he said. "I won't come in unless you want me to." I stood slowly, walked toward the window near the kitchen, and peeked through the blinds. There he was, parked at the curb, hands on the steering wheel, just waiting. My voice cracked. He kept talking, filling the silence I couldn't. "Your mother asked me to find you when you turned 18. I've waited a long time, but I didn't want to disrupt your life before you were ready." My knees buckled a little. She planned this. Before she died, when I was still too young to understand any of it, she planned for this day. I pressed the phone tighter to my ear. All the pain, all the distance, all the unanswered questions. It wasn't meaningless. She hadn't abandoned me to this. She had tried to protect me in her own quiet way. Adrian's voice dropped softer. "She wanted you to know that none of this was your fault." I shut my eyes. My hand gripped the kitchen counter like it was the only thing keeping me upright. "I don't know what to feel," I whispered. "You don't have to feel anything yet," he said. "Just step outside." I moved to the front door, laid my hand on the knob, but I didn't turn it. I couldn't. Not yet. Because opening that door meant letting in a reality I wasn't sure I was strong enough to hold. It meant letting go of the version of life I'd been surviving all these years. It meant hope. And that scared me more than anything. "I'm not ready," I said, so soft I wasn't sure if he heard me. But maybe that wasn't the point, because just then, before I could decide what came next, I heard the rumble of tires on gravel. A truck pulled into the driveway. I didn't have to look to know whose it was. Garrick was back. The growl of his engine cut off sharp, and the slam of the truck door came seconds later, loud, hard, like he wanted the whole neighborhood to know he'd returned. Heavy boots crunched across the gravel as he came toward the house, each step fast and deliberate. I stayed frozen at the doorway, one hand still resting on the knob. He spotted me before I could move. His eyes narrowed. "You ran off like a coward," he spat, voice rising before he even reached the steps. "You embarrassed me in front of the whole damn town." He was 3 feet away now, jaw set like stone, lips curled in disgust, his hair still messed from earlier, shirt sweat-stained across the chest. Rage radiated off him, raw, unfiltered, dangerous. And yet, all I could think about was how absurd that sentence was. He hit me in front of everyone. He tried to twist the truth. But somehow, I was the embarrassment. I didn't say a word. That silence, my silence, only made him angrier. He stepped closer, fists twitching. I didn't flinch, but my body tensed on instinct, shoulders rising like a reflex I'd never fully shaken. And then his gaze shifted, across the street. Adrian's black sedan was still there, unmoved, motor quiet. He was waiting for me, not pushing his way in, not barging into a house he had every right to feel furious about, just waiting. That kind of patience wasn't something I was used to. Garrick saw it too, and his lip curled. "That man is not your father," he barked. "I am. I raised you." I swallowed. My voice came out quiet, but it didn't shake. "You didn't raise me," I said. "You endured me." He blinked. Just once. Then his face twisted into something meaner. Before I could move or brace for whatever came next, he jabbed a thick finger toward my chest and shouted, loud enough for the neighbors to hear, "Harlan, get inside." I froze. Harlan. My breath caught in my throat. That name wasn't mine. Never had been. And it wasn't the first time either. He did it all the time growing up. During arguments, groundings, even once at Christmas when he told Harlan to clean up wrapping paper. I thought it was a fluke, maybe a slip of the tongue. But now I realized he never really saw me. Not fully. Not even enough to say my name right when he was angry. It stung more than any punch. Because it told me, plain as day, I was forgettable to him. A stand-in. A placeholder for a role he never wanted filled. I looked away. Then his voice turned cold again. "Oh, by the way," he said, like it was casual conversation, "that bonus check from your job last month? I cashed it. You owe this household. Don't look surprised." I blinked. "What?" "You heard me," he said. "That overtime? That was never just yours. You live under my roof. You eat my food. You want to walk around like a man? Start learning what it means to contribute." I stared at him. That check, I'd saved for weeks to earn that. I was going to open a separate account, use it for tuition maybe, books, a deposit for something, anything, that was mine. He took it like it belonged to him. "You stole from me," I said, voice hoarse. "I took what I deserved," he answered, straight-faced. And that was the final snap. Not the punch, not the years of gaslighting, of erasing my name from every proud moment I tried to have. Not the silence when I won awards, the backhanded compliments, the constant reminders I was never quite enough. It was this, the quiet, smug theft of something I'd earned. I felt it crack inside me, not a loud break, just a slow, quiet shift. A door closing that wouldn't reopen. I couldn't do it anymore. The fear drained out. Not replaced by rage, just nothing. I whispered to myself, more than him, "I can't do this anymore." His grip landed hard on my shoulder before I could take a step. Fingers tightening like a vice, thumb digging into the muscle just enough to make me wince. "You're coming inside," he ordered. "We're going to settle this." I jerked away, not out of courage, just survival. My body moved before my brain. And for the first time in my life, I pulled out of his grip fast enough that he didn't expect it. He stared at me, stunned. like he couldn't quite believe I resisted. Then I heard a car door shut. Adrian. He walked across the street, steps slow but deliberate, hands visible, calm posture. His voice cut through the thick air without raising an octave. "Garrick, take your hand off him." There was no shout, no challenge, just a fact, dropped in the space between us. Garrick spun to face him. "You stay out of my family." Adrian didn't flinch. "You lost the right to say 'my family' the day you chose to hurt the boy instead of raising him." My stomach flipped. I didn't expect to feel anything in that moment, but I did. Not because someone came to save me, but because someone finally said the truth out loud, where it couldn't be swallowed or twisted or ignored. Adrian didn't speak for me. He just acknowledged me. And in that moment, something inside me stood up straighter. But it didn't last. Because when Garrick turned back toward me again, there was something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Not just anger, desperation. And I knew. He was about to cross a line even he couldn't walk back from. Garrick stepped in close, closer than he had all day. I could smell the whiskey on his breath, sharp and bitter, like old resentment that never aired out. His voice dropped low, meant only for me. "You're lucky I even kept you," he hissed. "A boy like you would have ended up in the system." That line. He'd used it before, sometimes whispered late at night, sometimes shouted during arguments when no one else was around. It was always his favorite weapon. He wore it like a badge of sacrifice, like keeping me was some act of charity that he should have been thanked for. But now I heard it differently, not as a threat, not as truth, but as what it always was, control. I didn't flinch. "You didn't keep me," I said, steady. "You trapped me. There's a difference." For a second, I saw something flicker across his face. Not confusion, just surprise, like he didn't expect the response, or maybe didn't know what to do when the words came back sharper than his. Behind me, I felt Adrian shift his weight on the porch, not stepping in, just present. That seemed to push Garrick over. Without warning, he grabbed my arm and yanked hard, pulling me across the threshold of the house, not to hit me, not to throw me. No, this was worse. He dragged me inside the place where he still believed he ruled, where the walls carried his voice and silence was the law. He shoved the door shut behind us. Everything went quiet. The living room looked exactly the same as it always had. Worn recliner, heavy curtains, pictures slightly tilted, like no one cared enough to straighten them anymore. The light from outside faded behind the blinds, casting long gray shadows across the carpet. I stood just inside the room, heart pounding, but not from fear, from fury, from clarity, from finally seeing it all for what it was. My hands trembled, not because I was scared, but because I was holding back 18 years of words I never got to say. I glanced at the old couch. I'd sat there after every award ceremony, clutching certificates Garrick never looked at. I'd curled up there with a bruised arm and told myself, maybe I tripped. I'd said sorry from that couch more times than I could count, for things I didn't do, for who I was. The silence in that room used to choke me, but not tonight. Garrick stood in the center of the room, fuming. Then, slowly, he pointed at the floor like I was some dog. "Sit," he barked. "We're not done." I didn't move. The rage twisted on his face. He stomped toward the side table, yanked open a drawer, and flung something at my feet. It fluttered to the ground, landing with a dull slap. An envelope, old, creased, yellowed at the edges. "That's the paternity test," he growled. "I took it years ago. Never told you. Didn't need to. You were never mine. Not worth the paper it's printed on. My chest tightened. Not with sadness, with heat. He'd known. All this time. And instead of telling me, he used it like a weapon in his back pocket, waiting for the perfect moment to break me clean down the middle. I stared at the envelope. Then slowly, I bent down. Not to obey him, but to pick it up. I held it carefully, like it might burn me, but I didn't look away. You kept this to control me, I said, almost a whisper. Garrick snorted. I kept it because you needed to know your place. I looked him in the eye. My place is not here. The words landed between us, solid and final, and something in me shifted. For good. The front door creaked open. Adrian stepped into the frame. He didn't cross the room, didn't reach for me, just stood there, voice steady as steel. Are you choosing to stay here? He asked, or choosing to leave with me? It was the first time anyone had asked me that. No conditions, no guilt, just a choice. Garrick's voice exploded behind me. He's not going anywhere. Adrian's gaze didn't flinch. You can't own a person, Garrick. That line landed like thunder. No one moved. I took a breath, folded the envelope in half, slid it into my pocket, and took a step toward the door. Garrick stepped in front of me. We stood toe to toe. I didn't back up. If you stop me again, I said slowly, you'll prove everything I ever feared about you was true. He didn't speak, didn't shove, but he didn't move either. And that silence, that pause, that was the moment I knew the power had shifted. I reached for the doorknob, and then, quiet, almost calm, he said something I never expected to hear. Something that sliced straight through me. You walk out that door, Garrick said, low and cold, and you're dead to me forever. I didn't move at first. The words hovered in the air, sharper than any slap, more final than any bruise. For most of my life, that sentence would have shattered me. It was the sword he'd always held, the one he never swung because the threat was enough. But now it felt like a strange kind of release. I used to fear those words. Tonight, they finally set me free. I turned the doorknob, but before I could open it all the way, his palm slammed against the door, hard. The thud echoed through the house, startling Adrian behind me. My back hit the wood as he leaned in, trapping me. His voice dropped to a hiss. You think that man out there cares about you? He showed up now because he wants something. They always want something. I didn't blink. He wants nothing from me. That's exactly why he's here. There was a tremor in Garrick's jaw, just beneath the rage, a flicker of something like fear. I knew that look. It was the face of a man watching control slip through his fingers. And that's when he snapped. He never tried to contact you. Not once, Garrick barked. He left. He abandoned you. I protected you from that. I looked at him. Really looked. Then I reached into my jacket pocket. I pulled out a small bundle. Rubber-banded, creased, stained from sweat and time. Letters. Some dated back 10 years. All addressed to me. All unopened. All with Adrian's name. I held them up like evidence in a trial I never asked to be part of. You hid them, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He never forgot me. You made sure I forgot him. His eyes darted to the letters, and then he lunged. I stepped back before he could grab them, cradling the bundle like it was glass. The room tilted with the weight of what I was holding. These weren't just envelopes. They were pieces of a life I'd been denied. Messages from someone who tried, while I was told no one did. Images rushed back. Birthdays where the mail came late. And Garrick looked irritated, like he was hiding something. All those years he said, "No one sends you anything." I'd believed him. Of course I did. Because kids don't doubt the people they fear. They just survive them. Adrian stepped inside, calm, controlled. His voice didn't rise. "I sent those," he said gently. "Every year, birthdays, Christmas, even random Wednesdays. I didn't always know if they'd get to you, but I hoped." My chest clenched, not with sadness, with the slow, aching realization that 18 years of silence wasn't abandonment. It was theft. "You were going to take him from me," Garrick shouted, voice cracking now. "You think I didn't know? You think I didn't see how he looked at you, how he wanted out? I wasn't going to lose another person in this house." The confession fell like a stone. It was never about love. It was about control. About owning something so he wouldn't feel small. I opened my graduation envelope, slowly, deliberately. The one I handed him earlier today. The one he never bothered to open. Inside was a single document. A signed affidavit from the lab confirming two things. Adrian was my biological father, and Garrick had tampered with the original copy he kept. I held the page up. "You didn't keep me because you cared," I said. "You kept me because you needed someone to hurt." The line landed like a hammer. He didn't say a word. Adrian moved beside me, not touching, just close. His presence was enough. I looked around the house. Every wall, every frame, every corner of silence I'd learned to tiptoe through. It all looked so small now, shrunk down to match the truth of what it really was. "I'm leaving," I said. "Not to get back at you. Not to be cruel." I paused, meeting Garrick's eyes. "I'm leaving because staying here is killing me." He had no answer. No more tricks. No more threats. Just a hollow stare. I walked to the front door again, this time opening it without resistance. The air outside was cooler, softer. It smelled like cut grass and freedom. Adrian followed at a distance, letting me lead. At the end of the driveway, I turned around one last time. Garrick stood in the doorway, smaller than I'd ever seen him. Not physically, but in presence. The way an old statue cracks and reveals it was hollow all along. "You can call me dead to you," I said. "But today's the first day I finally feel alive." I turned away. Adrian was waiting beside the car, leaning against the passenger door. Before I could say a word, he reached into his coat and pulled out a second envelope. He held it out. "This," he said, "is the one letter I never had the courage to send." He handed it to me slowly, like it might break. The paper was worn, soft around the edges, like it had been held too many times but never delivered. We sat quietly in his car, parked on a ridge just outside of town. The streetlights below us glowed faint orange, stretching shadows across the fields. Inside the cabin, it was still, too still. The kind of silence that asks you to breathe slowly. I held the envelope in my lap. The handwriting on the front was slanted but steady. My name, written like it mattered. For years, I used to imagine something like this. On birthdays, Christmas, days when Garrick's silence grew too loud. I'd wonder what it would feel like to hear from the man I wasn't allowed to remember. Now the letter was here, real. I didn't open it right away, not out of fear, but because I understood, once I broke that seal, I couldn't go back. Adrian cleared his throat, soft. "I wrote it the year you turned 13. I looked over. He wasn't watching me, just the windshield. It was the first time I admitted to myself that losing you was the worst mistake I ever made. I felt that. He went on, voice low. I didn't send it because I thought it would make things worse. I thought maybe you were better off not remembering me. I didn't know Garrick was keeping the letters. If I had known... He stopped. I nodded. That pause said everything. This was the first time an adult had ever spoken to me without anger or blame or some twisted version of love that sounded like control. He wasn't perfect, but he was trying, and trying felt like a miracle. I broke the seal. The letter inside was handwritten, ink blotted in places, like he'd stopped to think or maybe to cry. I read it slowly, eyes tracing every word like they'd been waiting years for them. He apologized for leaving, for hesitating, for trusting Garrick, for not fighting harder, for every lost moment, every birthday missed, every mile between us. One line held me. If you ever want a place where you are enough just by existing, my door will always be open. My hands shook. But it wasn't sadness, it was release. Like every muscle in my body had finally been allowed to stop bracing. I stared at the last line until it blurred. Adrian didn't interrupt. He just let the letter land the way it needed to. A memory tugged at me. Earlier that night, no, just hours ago, Garrick had barked a name at me that wasn't mine. Harlan. Like I'd never mattered enough to be remembered properly. Like I was replaceable. Furniture. Weight. I looked over at Adrian, still staring through the glass. He noticed the look on my face. Silas, he said, careful. I'm proud of your name, and of you. And that right there, that undid something. It didn't fix everything, but it was the first thread of something new. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I checked it. A string of texts. One from Mrs. Bentley across the street, another from a number I didn't recognize but guessed was Officer Barnes. Someone had seen Garrick drag me inside earlier. They called the sheriff. There were no sirens, no lights, just a message asking if I felt safe, if I wanted to give a statement. I replied, I am safe. I have left the household. I do not feel threatened now. I didn't need revenge. Freedom was enough. I stared at the message a long while before hitting send. And when I did, it felt like I'd finally put a period at the end of a sentence that had run too long. Then I asked the question that had been burning in my chest since Adrian showed up. Why today? He didn't pretend not to know what I meant. He sat back, exhaled through his nose. Because today, he said, you became a man, and I thought you deserved the truth before life pushed you any deeper into pain you didn't earn. I let that settle. I'd always imagined grown-up life came with bills, jobs, maybe even freedom, but no one ever told me it could come with clarity too. The kind that didn't just change how you saw the world, but how you saw yourself. Adrian turned to me. What do you want to do now? The road stretched out ahead of us, two faint lanes disappearing into mist. I don't know, I said honestly, but I know I'm done feeling small. He smiled, not wide, just enough. Then we start there. I didn't ask where we were going next. I didn't need to. For the first time, I had space to figure it out. I chose not to go back to Garrick's, not out of fear, but because it didn't feel like home. I'd stay with Adrian for a while, not forever, just long enough to breathe. The quiet wrapped around us as the night shifted slowly toward morning. The stars began to thin, the edges of the sky taking on a dull gray that hinted at dawn. I rested my forehead against the cool glass of the window. I walked out of Garrick's house thinking I was breaking something, I whispered. But the truth is, something inside me finally healed. Forgiveness? Maybe someday, but not for him. For me. Because I couldn't carry this weight forever. And healing didn't mean inviting pain back in. It just meant learning to live without it defining every part of me. The sky turned silver at the edges. I stepped out of the car and stood on the gravel shoulder, stretching for the first time all night. The air was crisp, clean in a way I hadn't felt in years. Adrian joined me, quiet. We stood there side by side, not speaking, not needing to. Father and son, not perfect, but real. I looked out at the horizon, where the sun hadn't quite broken yet, but promised it would. I'm not a mistake, I whispered to myself. I never was. And for the first time in my life, the future didn't feel like a sentence. It felt like mine.